Hilchas Matami Mishkav Umoshav Perek Shleisha Aser. So we learned that Bechlal Kelim that finds itself B'Reshus HaMa'aretz, so even the Kelim of a Chaver is B'Cheskas Tumah, because it's, since B'Reshus HaMa'aretz is B'Cheskas Tumah. There's also a Chatimtza where you have Kelim that are Kelim of a Chaver, and the Amoritz has access to those Kelim. So when the Amoritz has access to the Kelim, is also we worry about the Tumah, B'Cheskas Tumah, because we say the Amoritz touched it. Now here it's not so clear. There's machlekes in Pshat in the Mishnayos. Here the Ram says, Kain Shatir Kelev Lekazu, he was matayr his Kelim for this gas. These Kelim are his Kelim, and he was matayr to use for the dricha of this gas. And v'hinichon legas haba, and lepeil, after he was matayr, he used the pashtus for this gas, and he was also v'hinichon, now he left these Kelim legas haba, and they find themselves in the gas. So the din is harelu b'cheskosam, they remain b'cheskosam. So some Mefarshim learn pshat in the Mishnah that Bartanura says that it's talking about that the gas belongs to the Amoritz, and the Achaver went ahead and he made the gas of the Amoritz betara, and he left his kelim, which he was metayr legazu, he left it in the gas of the Amoritz. And the question is, even though it's in the gas of the Amoritz, are we choshed that the Amoritz touched it, or we say that since he knows it's the kohen's kelim, and the kohen is someone that's eichel betaris, so memele he wouldn't come near those kelim which are belong to the kohen. Mashenkin to Yisrael, like the Rambam is going to say b'hamshach. That's how the Bartanura learns pshat. The Rambam himself in Pirush Mishnayos learns that it's talking about a gas that belongs to the kohen, and vice versa, the Amoritz has access to that gas. The Amoritz has access to that gas. So the shaila is, are we worried that the Amoritz is going to touch the kelev of the kohen, which is the cover in the kohen's gas, but the Amoritz has access to it. Kohen is not so clear in the Rambam. Kohen shatir kelev legazu, he was matayr his kelim for this gas, and v'hinichom, they left those kelim legas haba. So the din is harelu b'cheskosam, they remain b'cheskas tor. She'ena me'aretz negem b'kelim shel kohen zeh, she'hem b'tor gitei. The Amoritz is not going to touch the kelim of the Kohen, which is B'ter Gitei. So those that learn B'ter Gitei means in the gas of the Amoritz, or those that learn Fakert, B'ter Gitei of the Kohen, Mipnei Shu Eichel Taris, because the Yisrael is Eichel Taris. And because the Kohen is Eichel Taris, eats Truma, so Memela, so he's Nizer, he knows that he shouldn't get near anything that belongs to the Kohen, which is Eichel Taris. And even though normally we don't say that a Kohen is Nizer from Kelim, that an Amoritz is Nizer from the Kelim of a Kohen, but over here, since it was talking about it was tir, and there was the Amoritz maybe saw shatir kelev legazu, and he left it there. So b'chiagavnu al kol ponim, and this tzir, we say again, the tzir is the kohen was matayr kelev legazu, and he nichon legas haba. And so we said we're not choshish that the Amoritz was matayr these kelim. But pastors, we learn that we're talking about even if it's in the gas of the Amoritz. Aval shel Yisrael, but if it didn't belong to a kohen, it wasn't the kohen that was tir gazu, but rather it was shel Yisrael. This whole case was with a Yisrael. So then it's harelu tmeis. Then it's tummy. So the kelim of this Yisrael, the chaver, which was tir kelev legazu, v'nichon legas acheres, we are choshish that maybe the Amoritz touched these kelim. Harelu tmeis. Ad sheyemer belibi hoya lishmer Amoritz sheikonis legas. I was making sure that the Amoritz shouldn't go into the gas. Shaliyiga bekelim. Now this pashtus advarim sounds easier in a case where we're dealing with a gas that belongs to a kohen, and normally Amoritz has access to it, and Amoritz has access to this gas. So again, it's not so clear, but I'll call upon the Nekudas Hadvarim is that there's a chiluk between a kohen and Yisrael. A kohen that was near Kelov, Begazu, Bishul Shana Bo, is Becheskes Tara, and the Yisrael, it's not Becheskes Tara unless it says, Belibi Hoya, that he was being shamer, that an Amoritz shouldn't come and be Matamed his Kelov. Halacha base. Hareitza lasis yeni betara bu'umnan amiharetz. He's a chaver, but he wants to hire umnan, which are amiharetz, in order to make his yain. So the din is hareza matbelis habetzim. He has to see to it that those that are going to cut the grapes should be toivel. And the reason is because the grapes, the Chazal instituted that the grapes, right by the psira, already have a din of being muksher lekabel tumah. They're considered muksher lekabel tumah, and since they're muksher lekabel tumah, so if a tumah cuts the grapes, so memela, so they're already tummy. So therefore, he has to be matbel those that are going to cut the grapes, That's been a grapes. If he wanted to have wine, they'll make wine. So I'm going to make oil, rather press oil. So then he doesn't have to be toivel the people that are going to cut the olives. Over here is matbel is habadodim. He only has to be matbel the pressers. And because over there it really doesn't become mukshal lekabel tumah until it's already in the keli in which it gets warm and it gets wet. So over there it becomes mukshal lekabel tumah. But when they take it off the tree, it's not yet mukshal lekabel tumah. And v'tzarech lamid alum nachiyit mulfanov. In other words, you can't just send them into the place where they should be tevel and assume that they will be tevel. No, he has to be there and stand and see them being tevel. Shahari einam yedin hilchas tefillah v'chatzitza. They don't know all the rules. They may not know that they have to be completely immersed in the mikveh, and they may not know that there's a problem if there's a chatzitza. So therefore, he has to be there and see to it that there's no chatzitza, and they actually went completely into the mikveh. Now Yotzu, so now he already has either the Badodim Tehirim or he has those people that are Boitzrim on our Tehirim. Now Yotzu Chutz Lepesach Beis Habad, if these people, let's say they're already in the press and they go out of the press, V'nifnu Acheri HaGeder, they had to relieve themselves, so they went behind the Geder in order to relieve themselves, V'chozru, is Harei L'B'tarasim, they're still Torah. So even though they went behind the Geder, but never they're still Torah. Rush says that it's talking about that he actually still sees their head. In other words, he doesn't see them. He doesn't see they're bitzinner as far as what they're doing. But on the other hand, he can still see the top of their heads. Others say that the Pashto says that since they're Acheri Aged and they know that he could come there, so Memela, so we're not choshish that they became Tommy there. Now at Kama Yarchiku Vehin Teirin, how far could they go and they should still be Torah? At Kedei Shali Yisos Rumeinem, that they shouldn't be closed from his eyes. In other words, he should be able to see them. So l'chura, that was the kasha. If they're nifnu mi'acheri ageder, the pashtus he doesn't see them. So how could you say that they're still b'cheskes Torah if you're saying that you have to be able to see them? So the answer is either the answer is that he does see them, because he sees the top of their heads, he doesn't see the rest of their body. That's one possibility. Or the possibility is that since they're not yarchiko, they weren't yarchiko, they just went ma'acheri ageder. And it's obvious that all he has to do is go outside and go also ma'acheri ageder and see if they're doing something which is making them tamei. So memela we're not choshish. Avolum nistru miyeinov, if they're in a position where he can't see them anymore, is chazrul tamosim, so they become tamei again. Achiat bilim pam acheres, he has to put them into the mikvah a second time, and then the Yarav Shimshon, he has to wait for Harav Shimsh. Is Bekitzer, a person that's a chaver, that wants to use an amaretz to work for him, so if he wants someone to cut grapes, he has to make sure that that person goes to the mikvah, and there's Harav Shemesh, and only then could they go ahead and make the grapes. And if we're dealing with people to make oil, so then he has to, the people that are going to do the press, he has to again see to it that they should go to the mikveh and have Harav Shemesh. If they left the press and they went behind the wall in order to relieve themselves, that's fine. But if they went far and to an extent where he can't see them, so then he has to again put them into the mikveh. Now what happens if he went behind the door, the wall, and he can't see them, but they just really went to relieve themselves and they come back? So does that go into the gather that he can't see them? So Mela, that then would only be if he actually still sees them partially, because he sees the top of their heads, like we said, or lavdafke. That's an argument between Mefarshim, Pshat, and Ram. Halachi Gimel. Habadodim v'haboitzrim shenimtzes tumis lefneim. You went ahead. You were toivel them in the mikveh. They were toyer, but now you see a dover tummy in front of them, a sheretz. Is nemonim leimar lei nagaina. We didn't touch the sheretz. In other words, they didn't go anywhere else. He found, let's say, in the press, he found a sheretz. So we say they're nema to say that we didn't touch it. V'chein b'tinoki shalem, they're nema to say that their children, which are b'cheskes tamei, the children are b'cheskes tamei. So nevertheless, they could say that their children didn't touch anything in the press. They're believed to say that, even though they're amaratzim, but they're believed to say that they didn't touch this particular tumah, and also they're believed to say that their children didn't touch the shemen. Halacha dalet. Now, Hamatayres Abadodim, someone went ahead and took these people that are working in the press, he made them Torah, he was table them, and V'chnison lebeis abad, and he put them into the press, and V'noal aleim, and he locked the door, so maybe they can't come out. Now, im hoyu shom kelim shenitmu b'medus, if there were kelim inside this press, which became tummy b'medus, you know, someone, a zava was sat on them or stood on them, and these kelim are nitmu b'medus, so they're an avatuma, and they're matami b'magu b'masa, this kelim shenitmu b'medus, so then is harei beisabat kuli tummy. Why? Because shem nogu ba'isna kelim. Because if they saw dvar tumah, so they're believed to say that they didn't touch a sheretz. People know a sheretz is matame. So since they know that they were table them, and especially in order to make this betara, and they realize that a sheretz is matame, so therefore we believe them that they didn't touch it. Masha'inkin, when we're dealing with medres, tumas medres will be matame them, benegia, lav dafka they know about it. Lav dafka they realize that, so therefore we're concerned. Shem nogo beis nakelim. And vafilu ro esam mikedem nizharim beis nakelim mipnei tumasam. Even though he saw that they were careful, so they did realize that these kelim are matame. So l'chura, what's the chshash? Just like by a sheretz, we believe them to say they didn't touch the sheretz because they know that a sheretz is tame. So l'chura over here we see that they realize that this medrash is also matame. V'hor raya they would nizharim. But there's another concern. Sheme hisitu. Maybe they move the kelim. The heim medamin sheina mesutame. Sheina miyaretz became betumas hesed. V'yeh hesed means noise. In other words, when someone moves this merkev, so that's Tommy mitzad noisis hamerkev. You know, since he's noisis hamerkev, and moving is considered like carrying it. And merkev is dachmatami, like we learned before, b'mago b'masa. So it could be that these amaratzim, they're not aware that it's matami b'masa. So nachamol. Normally we say that if there was a sheretz there in the Beis Habad, and they say they didn't touch it, we believe them. They're also believed to say their children didn't touch the oil, because they understand that children have becheskas tumah, and memela, they're believed to say the children didn't touch the tumah. Now, what happens if there was a tumas merkev over there, Mishkav Umoshav? So that's the chmatam b'mago b'masa. So we're choishish, maybe they touched the Mishkav Umoshav because they didn't know that it was tummy. What happens if we saw that they were choishish of the tumah? V'haraya, they were being nizer before, and we saw them being nizer, so they were obviously aware that this merkev is matame, but nevertheless, we're choishish that maybe they didn't realize it's also matame if you move them, the Mishkav Umoshav, because that would be tumas masa, and memela, so we're choishish, and therefore they're becheskas tumah, unless we know for sure that they didn't move it, unless we do it. So that's why Harei Sabat Tomei Shemi Hisitu Ve'imedam and Sheina Mesed Tomei Sheina Me'oretz Bikim B'tumas Hesed. The idea that by moving the Hesed, its Tomei is also the pastors they don't know about it. Halacha Hey Hoyu Chamorov Upealov Teinam Te'alis. He has people that are carrying or delivering this for him. Chamorov are the people that are leading the donkeys, or Pealov, some people that are carrying the objects and transporting things. And Ve'evin Lefonov, they were in front of him. They weren't next to him, they were in front of him. Is Afal Pisha Fligu Yeser Mil, even if they went in front of him more than a mil is the amount of, is like 2,000 amas. Is Hare Elu Teiris, nevertheless, that Teiris, Mipnei Shum Becheska Shum Mishemra. Because the pastors, he's watching them, Ve'im Befachtem Liga, Ve'im Achshav Yave, Shari Yave Achreno. So since he's behind us, so even though they're a lot ahead of him, but they're afraid that he might come all of a sudden and see them. And Mela, they're not going to go ahead and touch it because they're afraid to be metamed. They know they're not supposed to be touching it. He told them clearly, you go, and I'll come later. So in other words, he's saying basically that he's not coming right away. You don't have to worry. I'm coming acharechem. So kivin shniskasu mi'enov. Once he can't see them anymore, zarei and tmeis. So in other words, when they're worried the whole time that he's going to come, so then even though he can't see them, but since they're worrying that he might come, so memela, so we're not cheshish fatuma. Mashengan over here, he told them clearly they could go, and memela were cheshish fatuma. Allah chavav. Chaver shahayu lavish b'chaluk. He was wearing like a robe, and also va'otav b'talis, and he was wrapped around with a talis, with a garment above this chaluk. U'mahalach, and he was walking. Ba'amar, now he says, Belibi haya lishmer sachaluk. In my mind, I had very clear that I had to make sure that this chaluk doesn't touch anything that's going to be matamit. V'hayisi nizabrain, I was careful about it. However, v'hisachti daitim in talis. I didn't really think about the talis. Because the talis, I wasn't really paying attention that the talis shouldn't become tummy. So the din is Hari Acholuk B'Tarasi. The Choluk, since he was paying attention, so it's tar. Aber v'hatalus tmeya, because Shem and Noga ba'amoritz. There's the fact that in order to make sure, even though this belongs to a chaver, the chaver is wearing it, but since he has to be careful, there has to be a das, that he's careful that it shouldn't be touched by an amoritz. And even though he was careful about the choluk, but since he didn't have specific mind about the talus, so he's careful about the choluk, so being careful about the choluk will also make sure that the talus won't become tummy. We say, no, maybe the talus waved or whatever. So in other words, the fact that he's being careful about the choluk doesn't memela make it being careful about the talus, and therefore the talus is becheskes tum. That's din number one. So in other words, you have to, it's like a din that it's not enough, a kalim of a chaver, l'churi, he's walking, what's the problem? The answer is no, he has to be consciously aware that there's a possibility of tumah, and he has to make a conscious decision that he's watching it, mipnei tumah. Hoya sal al ksefei, umagrefa b'techa sal. He's carrying a basket on his shoulder, and in this basket there's a pitchfork. A magrefa is a pitchfork. Ba'amar, and he says, Belibi hoya lishmer sasal. So first of all, in my mind, I wanted it to be shemer sasal, period, that it shouldn't become tummy from anything. And also, v'lishmer is hamagrefa midavar hamatama. I wanted to make sure that the sal, the magrefa doesn't become tummy from davar hamatama, avalei midavar hapoisla. Now the word davar hamatama and davar hapoisla by magrefa is a shver loshen, because a magrefa can become really puzzle. Puzzle is a musik, mashal truma. When it becomes a shlishi, it's called a puzzle. And it becomes a sheni, it's called a tummy. A magrefa can become a shlishi. So the Mefarshim, the Mishnah explains as I was making sure that the magrefa shouldn't be able to be metami something else. In order for magrefa to become tummy, it could be in one of two ways. Either an avatuma touched the magrefa, and then the magrefa becomes a rishon l'tumah. And if it became a rishon l'tumah, so it can make something into a sheni l'tumah, which a sheni will be tummy. So that's called davar hamatami, something which will cause it to be able to be metami. That's the taish davar hamatami. Or another way a magrefa could become tummy if it touches a rishon l'tumah. Now, the only rishon l'tumah that could really be metami a magrefa is only mashkin tmeim. Mashkin tmeim, which is a rishon l'tumah, could be, if it touches a magrefa, the magrefa becomes a sheni. It's a din d'Rabbanan, because midiraisa only an avatuma can be metame kelim. Over here midirabanan, so this mashke could be metame a keli, and that keli will become a sheni. So basically, he's saying I was watching the magrefa to make sure that it doesn't come into contact with an avatuma. Which, if it comes into contact with an avatuma, so it'll become a rishon, and if it becomes a rishon, it could be metame something else. But I wasn't paying attention that it shouldn't come into contact with a rishon l'tumah, which will make it into a sheni tumah, which will enable it to pass the truma. That's the word. V'amar, belibi hoya lishmer is asal. V'lishmer is, that's number one, period. And v'lishmer is magrefa, and I was watching also the magrefa, midavar hametama, from something which would cause the magrefa to be able to be metami something else. That I was watching. I wasn't watching it from mashkin tmeim, which would cause the magrefa to be able to be passel something. Because the magrefa will become a sheni, and then it'll be able to passel, make it into a shlishi. So the din is as a sal tor, because Lepeli was watching the sal, so the sal is tor. The magrefa is tummy, it means the magrefa were choshesh that maybe it came into contact with mashkin tmeim. And therefore, v'chol truma shebesal, any truma which is in the sal is psula. Mipnei magrefa tmeya shebesal is eichel shebesal. Because of this magrefa the tmeya, because since he wasn't watching the magrefa, so memela it's pesel the eichel shebesal. Now hoya mishtamish, that's the number one. Hoya mishtamish min achavis betare becheske shuchul. So now we're learning over here that there's madregas and shmira. He has to watch it. He has to make sure to watch it that it should be in such a way that it also is not going to become tamei and become a sheni. Now here we're learning another din in the madrega of shmira. Hoya mishtamish min achavis betare becheske shuchul. He thought that the chavis was chulin, and he was watching it. He was making sure that it doesn't become tamei. And then later he realizes that it was truma. Is afal pishitei, even though this chulin is tired, it's us. I mean, even though be'emes it's tired because it was didn't touch anything that's tamei. Memeli you're not allowed to burn it, but nevertheless it's this truma which is in the chavis, which he was washing becheskes that it's chulin is asura b'achila. Because why? Because Shem and Noga Batful Yem Shu Pesel Betruma V'Tor B'Chulin K'mei She'Yizbar. Because there's a concern, maybe a Tful Yem touched it. And as a Tful Yem is only Pesel Truma, not Chulin. So if he thought it was Chulin, so he was only worried about a tummy, not about a Tful Yem. Now that we realize it's Truma, so we're saying it wasn't watched from a Tful Yem. And the Pashtus Advarim means that in a Dem Mishamer Chulin means over here he has to watch it from a Tful Yem, and over here he doesn't have to watch it from a Tful Yem. Perhaps we'll see the Lashon that it's also a different, not only if he has to watch it more and not less. L'chura the Vart is because for Truma he's more careful. That's L'chura the Pashtim Shad. Ve'ina Dema Mishamer Truma, L'Mishamer Chulin. But L'Pel, now the Rambam say, V'm Amar B'libi Hoya, L'Shamra Afilu B'Dover HaPesel. He said clearly, I was watching it, not only from a Tomei, which would Metame Chulin, but I was also being Metamet from something that could passel Truma. B'libi Hoya, L'Shamra Afilu B'Dover HaPesel, even though I thought it was Chulin, is a rezu mutaris bachila. Is nachamos. So a person has a chavis, aliba de emes, the chavis is truma, and he's watching it, assuming that it's chulin, and lepel is watching it, make sure that it doesn't become tamei. So we say that since it's truma, so memela that watching of the madrega of chulin is not enough watching for the truma, because lepel for truma you have to watch it also for tful yem. If he claims that he watched the taken, that even a tful yem shouldn't touch it, so then it's mutter even if it's truma. Now is another din. Is chalful kelim shel Shabbos, the kelim shel chel. A person during Shabbos he wears one sort of kelim, and during the chel he wears another sort of kelim. Now lepel during the week he was intending on putting on kelim of chel, and lepel he put on kelim shel Shabbos. He was intending on putting on kelim shel chel, and lepel he put on kelim shel Shabbos. And v'lavshan he wore these kelim. So the din is l'chure, he was making sure that they shouldn't become tummy. But there's a madrega of kelim shel chel and kelim shel Shabbos. And the madrega of shmira of kelim shel Shabbos is stronger than the madrega of shmira shel kelim shel chel. There's no different shmira from what? It's not like a tful yem, and not a tful yem. It's all the same thing that's matame on Shabbos and matame during the chel. But lepel, a person watches his kelim shel Shabbos more than he watches his kelim shel chel. Now lepel, this person assumed that it was kelim shel chel and it was really kelim shel Shabbos. So these kelim are normally watched in a stronger watch, because normally the kelim shel Shabbos and he watches them as kelim shel Shabbos. Now he was watching these kelim shel Shabbos assuming that they were kelim shel chel. So even though he wasn't watching them from anything different, but lepel, since he was assuming it was kelim shel chel, so therefore it wasn't such a madrega of watching, and therefore it's considered legabi, these kelim, which are normally watched better, so therefore they're not considered a watch. Like a dover, and that's different than we learned before. But again, before we were saying Lamashal, he thought it was chulin, and lepel was truma. So over there the question is, what's he watching it from? Is he watching it from tful yem, or he's not watching from tful yem? And lepel, if he tainas that he was watching it also from tful yem, even though he's watching it, assuming that it's chulin, we say it's tor. Even though the chura there's a din that we said before, in deima mishama truma l'shama chulin, so the chura it's a different level of watch, but we don't rechazak with that. We say that since he thought it was chulin and he was watching it also for a tful yem, it's considered watching. Masha'inkim b'negei b'godim, where there's no different types of things. Nevertheless, we say if he thought that it was chayil and lepel was Shabbos, so for Shabbos dikabega this shmir is not called a shmir. Let's read again. It's chalful kelim shel Shabbos b'kelim shel chel. He thought that he was wearing kelim shel chel, and by accident he put on kelim shel Shabbos and v'lovshon. So the din is nitwu. They have a din of tuma. Why? She'enim mishaber kelim shel chel kekelim shel Shabbos. So legabi Shabbos dikekelim. Legabi Shabbos dikekelim. A chel dikashmir is not called a shmir. Ma'isa b'shtei noshim chaveres sheneschalfu lam kleim bebeis hamerchatz. Their kelim were exchanged in the beis hamerchatz. And lepel uba ma'isel lefnei chacham v'timu hakel, and they were matame the kelim. So they were really both chaveres, and they both had kelim. They were both chaveres. But nevertheless, so nischalfu lam kleim beis hamerchatz, and lepel he was timu hakel. Now the question, why was timu hakel? So there's different biurim. Some biurim is that the pshat is, since the woman, when she realized that she doesn't have her kelim, that she's wearing someone else's kelim, so she thinks, so to speak, that her kelim are maybe by Hamoritz. She doesn't know if it's an Eishes Hamoritz. So Memela, since she thinks that it's Eishes Hamoritz, so Kilu, she was Mesiach Das from those kelim, and in her mind those kelim are Tomei, And therefore, even though the kelim were biyad eishes chaver, but nevertheless, those kelim don't have a din of tumas. So then, if that's the pshat, so the chud is not really behemshach to what we're learning over here. Over here, the other pshat is that the pshat is she realized it's not her kelim. Whereas it was nischalful a kelim, and she realized that it wasn't her kelim. Not again, she knew that the other person was an amoritz, not an amoritz, but she had her kelim and she thought that it was hers. That's why she took him. And then lepel, she realized that it wasn't hers. So she's still watching it, but she's watching it betur kelim of someone else, and she's not watching it betur kelim of her own. And that's what we're saying, that when a person watches kelim, and not in the same madrega that these kelim are normally watched, so then those kelim have a din kila, they weren't watched. In other words, we're learning here a din as a chaver, his kelim are becheskes tar. But then there's another din that he has to watch his kelim. It's not enough that the becheskes tar. He has to watch his kelim. Like we said before, he had to have in mind that he's watching the chaluk, and he has to have in mind that he's watching the talus. He has to have in mind that he's watching it. Now we're learning another din, that this gather of watching it has to be, so first of all we're learning it has to be a watching it from something, by truma, it could be matami through, it could become puzzle through a tvul yem, so you have to watch it from a tvul yem as well. But now we're learning, even if you're watching it for the same thing, but it has to be in the same level of watching that it's normally watched. So Big Day Shabbos is normally watched als Big Day Shabbos, so it needs to be watched als Big Day Shabbos. When you're watching someone else's kelim, which is not yours, so it's not your kelim when you watch is different. You watch someone else's is different. So we'll learn behemshech. If that person told you, I'm relying on you, so that's something else. Then your watching is as good as his watching. Masha'inkin over here, there was no one ever said you're relying on you. So I'm watching because she's a chaveira. She's nizabetaris. But on the other end, it's not her own, so therefore it's not considered Torah. That's this din. Now this weiter is a hemshech. Afilu noflum apartem imenu. Her kerchief fell off. V'amr lechaver, and she tells the chaver tnoli, and v'nosnoli nitmes. Why? So he says two reasons. First of all, gzeira shemiyit nano lamoritz, because enachnami was a chaver, but lepel gzeira shemiyit nano lamoritz. So maybe you could say over there also by the nischalfulei, maybe the amoritz will get these kelim. Oi, another reason, shalei chaver mishamra. The chaver is not going to really be mishamra. She'eno the mishamra kelim she'eno shalei. So mainly the fact that the chaver picked it up, he's a chaver. But Lepel, since he picked it up and he's not being mishamret, kekelim shelo, like she's watching her own kelim, felt in the shmira. That's called halacha, that you have to have a shmira, and not only you have to have a shmira and the same madrega of shmira that this kelim are normally used to. Halacha zayin. Chaver shemes v'iniach taris is harelu teres. We assume that these taras are taras. Hiniach kelim, so because if it wouldn't have been taras, he would have gotten rid of it. He would have made sure not to have it, because a chaver is nizar b'taras. However, hiniach kelim is arein tmeim. The kelim are tmeim. Why? Because the fact that he has the kelim is not a raya that it's not tummy. Because shaniyim Hashem nitmu, maybe they were tummy. V'hiza aleim b'shlishi v'aday lehiza aleim b'shviyim. Eishem lehiza aleim b'shviyim v'aday lehitbel. Eishem lehiza aleim kolikar. So in Mela, the Becheskas Tumah, we're not really sure. Notice the fact that the chaver has these kelim is not an indication that these kelim are Torah. It's very possible that the kelim are Tumah. Halacha Ches. Misha Amalei Eidachod Nitmu Tarisecha V'Alo Sheisik. So the din is Harez in Neman V'Arein Tmeis. Notice an Eidachod is Neman to say about Taras that they're Tumah. V'Imik Chishay V'Amalei Nitmu is Arein Becheskas. So an Eidachod is not believed against the Bailam to say that Nitmu. Knows if he's Makhashim, so Mela say Eidachod Keneged Eidachod Bakhashalav Klum. Achi Yidu Shnaim. Unless there are two people that are saying that Nitmu Tarisecha, so now we believed the two Eidim against the Bailam. Now Hoya Eisi Ime Betaris Ibizvachim. Ula'achar Zman Motzi Va'amalei B'Shosh Shepogabei. You should know Taris Shosisi Imcha Nitmu or Zvachim Shosisi Imcha Nispaglu. And he never met him before, so the din is Ariz and Neman. Even though he's not only Neman b'shas Maisa, he's Neman later also. However, Avon Pogabei v'liyamali klum, he met him already before and he didn't tell him anything. V'achar kach Pogabei pam shniya, and then he meets him a second time. And v'amalei, and now he tells him for the second time. So then is Eini Neman. Then he's not Neman. Elarei zvacha b'cheskas kshedes v'taharesov b'cheskas tara. Rich Rachmona Desayan. We finish here. Hilchas Matame Mishkav Umoshav.